Hi, my name is Mary Spender and welcome to Series 2, Episode 5 of Tuesday Talks. This series will consist of 10 interviews in total with some of my favourite musicians. You can watch the interview in full here on YouTube, but if you prefer just to listen, you can also download the podcast, which is available everywhere now. This week I chat to Nahre Sol, a Juilliard-trained pianist-composer who you might already be aware of due to her creative and knowledgeable videos on YouTube about classical composers, practice, and different music genres. I can't recommend her As Digested by a Classical Musician series enough. It's brilliant, so head over to her channel and subscribe. This whole series is brought to you by DistroKid, my favourite music distribution service, which gets your music into your online stores and streaming platforms. And there is a link in the description for you to get 7% off your first year. I would love you to comment below and share your favourite moments of this conversation, maybe leaving a timestamp or quote. But first, let's get into the show. Tuesday Talks. Well, let's start with this in general as like the first question. In terms of mistakes making videos, what's like the most painful story you can share?
Most painful story? I'm not sure I have a single one, but there are recurring mistakes that happen all the time. And it always has to do with audio. I would record something, spend all this time. I have the camera set up, the recording devices ready, and I would just focus on the playing part, and I would realize only towards the end that something was wrong with the audio and it's unusable. Maybe I set it incorrectly or the battery ran out, I didn't notice. I would just get really focused during the recording session, just wouldn't realize something went wrong, and then I would just have to redo it. There's no way around that for me. So
I just had that this morning. Last night I was just trying to hit a deadline that I still haven't hit, and I put my Zoom on, and I was recording acoustic guitar, put my Zoom on a tripod rather than a stand, and the little like tripod plate rattled. So the hour of acoustic guitar recording I did, all the audio, it looks great. The video was great, but yeah, the rattle was just obviously completely unusable. And just sort of waking up this morning and being like, okay, you just gotta do that again. That's fine. I mean, we all have plenty of time stuck indoors right now, so.
Yeah, for sure. How are you coping with it all?
I know that some people are going through really, really tough times. It's we're still allowed to go out and exercise, but yeah, the stores are it's just really strange, really, really surreal. How about you? Are you in New York?
I'm in Toronto right now. I managed to escape New York just in time, and it wasn't so intentional, but it happened with the right timing, and I'm really glad that I'm not there right now. But I'm also just terrified for New York, and that's where I've been living. So I'm actually kind of in limbo. I'm not really sure where to go, what to do. I came to Toronto to record an album, and I'm just kind of stuck here because all of that has been postponed, and my plans were to after Toronto, go to Berlin and then California, and going to Europe is out of the question. Going to California, where my parents live, is also out of the question for the time being because my parents are, they're not in great health, especially my dad. So getting on a plane, risking, getting the virus and then going there is not really going to happen. And plus the borders are temporarily closed. So it's really strange.
It's so unbelievably surreal. I know that's basically what everyone is saying, but I made a video about it just a few weeks ago when it was just starting to hit, and I didn't even expect it to get this far. It's just so surreal. Yeah, with all the cancellations and everything, how have you been affected that way? So the album recording has been affected, but what were you doing in Berlin?
It was part of the recording. I was supposed to record solo piano at the Boulez Hall, and also do some video collaborations with a group that performs there. That was canceled, and some other lectures that I had going, because this season was kind of dedicated for these mini lectures and masterclass type sessions that I had planned, because last year it was all my time was dedicated towards a project that I did with PBS. And so I just pushed all of my live events to now until the end of summer, but those are all canceled.
What do you think you're going to do with your time in, while you wait to record?
For that project, it's on hold. I'm going to revise certain pieces just because I'm kind of like that. If I have more time with something, I'll just double check and see if I want to change anything, because a lot of my own music, there is definitely improvisation involved, but there's a specific structure and there are specific sections where I have everything written out and I have it specifically set up, and I learned it that way. So I'll go back and revise some of that, and in the meantime, with all of these cancellations, I have plenty of deadlines to chase for commissions. So I'll just work on those. And those were much long-term deadlines, but I'll just push them forward and keep myself busy and also make videos, I guess. So it's kind of an on and off thing for me with videos, but I definitely am consistent with it on a larger scale.
Well, by being so multifaceted with all the different things you've got going on, how do you, when someone asks you what you do, what's the first thing you say?
I'm a musician.
I was expecting sort of composer or performer or something like that, but yeah, musician makes sense.
Yeah. I think the first reaction would be I'm a musician, and if someone wants to know more specifically, I'm a pianist and composer. And I feel like if you're a musician of any kind these days in the modern world, it involves a lot of things. So I don't think I'm that special in terms of doing, video stuff, teaching, writing, performing, recording, a mixture of everything. I just feel like the more time progresses with all this modern technology and the changing landscape of the music industry, I feel like it's pretty necessary. Yeah. How about you?
I'm also a musician, but then I move on to sort of singer-songwriter. Yeah, YouTube is probably like the last thing I say.
Why is that?
I don't know. I'm not ashamed of being called a YouTuber if people want to call me that. It's just, it's the shortest thing I've been doing. So I imagine for you, studying classical music since, probably at what early age did you start?
Around 7.
7, right? So since 7, you have been a musician. And how old are you now, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm almost 29.
You're almost 29.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm 29.
Okay.
So yeah, that's awesome. It kind of, it just feels like the newest thing to me. But it just allows me to, like, last night with the mistake I was making, recording the guitars, and when I figured it out, I kind of had to sit with myself this morning and be like, okay, but you get to play guitar for a living via all this stuff. So this isn't exactly that painful to do again.
I feel like going back to what we were saying about mistakes, sometimes the mistakes that we make during a recording, whether it's just for audio or a video project, the most painful mistakes we forget about really quickly because they're easily fixed. And the mistakes that we don't realize we're making because we're so preoccupied with the certain details in the process of doing it, they kind of stick around and they're long lasting. So I think it's just hard in general to be so aware to catch all of everything that's going on. And the nature of what we do involves a lot of perfectionism. So it's a constant struggle.
Yeah. And well, also just a lot of things going on at the same time. So I've spoken about this with other musicians who are running YouTube channels, but there might be touring musicians and, like trying to document something whilst you're trying to get a performance, whether it's in your studio, whether it's on stage. It's just, you end up dividing your attention. So it's way more likely that something's going to go wrong And that's okay. And actually, you just come up with a formula. Like, I know now to check my microphone, check my camera, and like check the timer, and just like, you just come up with those sort of shortcuts to make sure that those mistakes happen fewer and far between. But yeah, sometimes it's even more painful when they actually happen less now, because you're like, I've done this before.
Right. And also when they do happen, just being kind to yourself.
It usually creates something better as well. Like this morning, I knew which camera angles worked and which ones definitely didn't. And yeah, you just move on. But how would you apply that to studying and then performing classical music?
Performing classical music.
Any embarrassing on stage stories, mistake wise?
Sure. I mean, that's, again, there are too many to count. But I'll put it this way. There have been very few, if not any, performances where I walked off stage thinking, great, that was fantastic. So I think it's just a matter of how many things that did I feel uncomfortable about, and also being so aware of things that went wrong or mistakes that I made. I feel like that in it of itself is not something ideal, because that means that I was focusing on certain details and not being present as a performer on stage. So maybe this is just overthinking things on stage and around stage, but it's always been a struggle to perform. And I think recently, I'll just because it's easier to remember things that were recent. About a year and a half ago now, I performed at this convention in Germany, and it involved speaking and playing. And without going into the details, the performance aspect of the whole event was not my greatest. And that left a huge scar on me, because, as you know, we're always as good as our most recent performance. And I really did not feel comfortable in any way. I didn't feel comfortable on stage after coming off stage. I didn't feel like I remembered anything that I played. I didn't feel emotionally expressive, anything. Everything was off. And I largely attribute it to the lack of preparation in general, but also trying to combine talking and performing, for me, I realize is very difficult at that level of, or at that scale. Because, of course, when I'm teaching or doing a lecture, I could definitely combine the two. But if I'm really just performing, I want to focus on that and not anything else. And it's hard for me to switch gears. And this was sort of like a TED Talk meets performance. And I was so nervous about the speaking that I just couldn't switch gears. So anyway, long story short, that was a big, big mistake, or a very painful memory for me. And since then, I've sort of performed less, because I knew that last year I was focusing on videos with PBS. So I think that was the catalyst for making that kind of decision. And now this year, I've planned for myself to come back to performing. At least that was the plan, but right now I'm just kind of on hold.
Yeah, it's out of your control right now. Everything you just said then is the mentality that I also grew up with, because I played viola and studied that at university. So I had all the jokes, all the viola jokes, don't you worry. And the you're only as good as your last performance thing. It's very difficult when it comes to being, because I wasn't in a professional orchestra, just sort of university orchestras. So you'd have a culmination period where at the end of each term you'd have that final concert, and then you'd have to wait 3 months till your next concert. So if you had a bad performance, or whether it was a recital or something like that, and I was a terrible soloist. Loved chamber music and orchestras, but yeah, solo wise, I was just terrible. Bow shake, all the nerves, sweaty palms. Had to get beta blockers from my doctor because I just knew that I would be too anxious performing. So I can't imagine actually having to, once you get to a certain level, like your level, and then being told to public speak at the same time when you already have an audience that's there ready and waiting. So you can't sort of start from the beginning again. So you can't be like, okay, well, I'm new to public speaking, so I'll have one person in the audience at first and then, you know, maybe a few more, or like they might be students, or, you know, they might not be quite so, I don't know, it might, how do I describe it? It just might not be as important, but it's a good learning curve, like as you go through it. But once you're out of university and out of that sort of education process, having to suddenly do TED Talks in front of, like, was it a live audience, and just like how many people was it?
I don't know how the people, the attendance amount, but it was maybe close to 1,000. I don't know. Just a lot of people.
Oh my God.
A lot of people.
Yeah. Well, you know, I guess you need to be kind to yourself about that. Like, if that was one of the first times you've ever really done that.
Yeah. I think I psyched myself out more than anything else. And also it's strange coming from a world where I was so focused on the performance aspect of things in the classical realm, because I hold myself to a certain standard with anything to do with performing or a project or anything. So I think it's quite ambitious to apply it to everything that I'm also new to, like you said. So it's a learning it's a learning process, and now I know I'm very careful about anything that I sign on to moving forward. Very careful about balancing that and being aware of how much I can handle of each kind of thing that I do on stage, because I'm not a natural performer at all. I'm not. Yeah, it doesn't come easy to me. I've learned to deal with it, and I've conditioned myself to understand how to function on stage. I think just through training and persistence throughout all the years. But that was always a struggle, in school, out of school, and I've also learned to embrace it. So it's not like I dread performing, period. There are elements of it that I really enjoy, but it does not come easy to me at all.
It's also a very different kind of performance, like whether it's your own composition or, you know, other kinds of classical music. It's so it's held in such high regard. The audience is dead silent. The auditoriums are different. Like it's very different to, say, doing an open mic or, you know, like so it's just, I completely understand. And thinking about it, I just remember all the anxieties I had before performing at school, at university or whatever. But it's just a very different way of holding yourself, that kind of performance, which not many people nowadays understand unless you've gone through that, because they'll be used to performing, you know, pop music, rock music. It's much more informal. Which is, you know, why also that sort of side is so popular, you know, people being able to, like, you know, you can barely, as an audience goer in those sorts of situations, you can barely sip a drink or like move without being scared of like having the judgment maybe of someone next to you, because everything needs to be just about the performance and no distractions. And, you know, so I just totally understand.
How about as a singer-songwriter? What are some things that you would describe as maybe performances or events that went terribly wrong? What types of things would go into that category?
I've made all the mistakes so that I'm still nervous because I still care. And I think that's the important thing. Like if you're getting nervous and anxious about something, it's because you really you've put so much effort into it, of course you want to do well, and you want to offer something to your audience. But with pop music, or as a singer-songwriter, it's still incredibly nerve-wracking, of course, especially going up on stage. Or I actually find playing in a band sometimes more nerve-wracking. And my most recent show was a full band gig in December in London, and I'd been very, very ill the week before in the run-up, and I walked on stage not really having practiced my solo set before the full band set, because we'd been in full band rehearsals, getting that sort of hour and 10 minutes down. And then I was like, oh, I'm being my own support act. I'm playing new songs, and just walking on and thinking, okay, all the hours of all the pub gigs I did, all the bar gigs I did for 4 hours, where sometimes I'd print out a tab, not really knowing the song, and challenge myself to just perform it live in front of, people who were getting drunk and not really caring. But all that sort of practice and all those horrible mistakes that I made in front of those people kind of benefited this later performance. But then I got up on stage, and during soundcheck, the guitars had been too loud. So I put my guitar amp on a different setting that I wasn't used to, but I thought I was doing it properly for the sound engineer. And then it just meant that my guitar was too quiet the whole gig. And I enjoyed every second of that gig, but just having that level of anxiety, being like, why is my guitar not working? Not realizing I'd made the change. I just came off, and I just beat myself up about it for the next week. And it was just like, at the moment, that was my last gig. So that's where I'm at. And luckily, the audience didn't seem to notice, or they weren't telling me, because I didn't want to complain about it. I didn't want to get off stage and be like, that was terrible, I couldn't hear my guitar. I didn't want to do that, because that's also the first thing you learn. It's like, if you make a mistake, don't tell anyone about it, because usually they actually won't notice, or you might ruin their perception of the performance. But yeah, just it's a strange balance, and it's actually it's why I love making videos, because like you can get it to a certain level of, obviously it's not always perfect, and sometimes you just have a deadline that you have to hit, but you can get it to a certain level where you're like, okay, this is the best I can do right now, and it's scalable. Whereas a 1-by-1 performance, you can just have a rough day, and you could be so well prepared sometimes and just have a bad day, like anything. So,
and that's also the charm of it, but it's tricky. How did you start getting into video making?
My dad had a camcorder when I was very young, so I just always stole his video gear, made music videos with friends. That's what I like about music in general. Like, the idea of collaborating it with video is so natural, especially when you're an aspiring little singer-songwriter like I was at 14, 15. And just, 3 years ago, I was just like, I'm not doing very well in music. I wasn't getting any attention from labels, or streaming plays were very, very low, and social media in general was quite low, but I wasn't really doing it well enough. So I just started finding the music community on YouTube and just started making videos. How about you?
A similar story. I think videos and playing really merge well together, and just being a part of this generation, I didn't really think twice about why exactly I'm doing it, or why exactly I started my first video, but I thought it was a neat way to document what I was doing, because I started at a time when I was for the first time really out of school, and exploring different genres, different things within music that I didn't focus on before, and I wanted to just keep track of that. I didn't have a teacher or a mentor really closely examining what I was doing, so I thought it'd be a fun and effective way to just really keep things organized and give myself a little bit of structure. And then it just kind of evolved from there, but in the beginning, I really loved putting little stop motion animations. I was really into that because I love photography, and I would give myself little little projects with different household objects, and then I would put music onto that and then include it in like a little daily vlog of practicing, that sort of thing.
I think when I was at university, which was probably a similar time around to, because did you study at Juilliard first? So was that when you were sort of 18, 19? Yeah. So if we're very similar age, I went to university at 19, and for those 3 years, like I didn't, it was before like really good cameras were affordable like they are now. So I'm very glad I didn't document. What am I glad? Maybe I'm a little bit sad that I didn't document all the hours I spent in a practice room. But the thing I feel about classical musicians now, and the way it's so time, it's such an intensive thing to be part of. To be the best in your field, you just have to put so many more hours in than any other kind of music, and just in terms of like practice and like really honing your craft and your instrument and studying and years of training, and I think it's incredible that you're able to show that and then also make stories out of it. And then I love your digested series and just that sort of thing, and like really giving a down-to-earth perspective on other genres without being patronizing or anything. Like, I know it's sad to say, but sometimes classical musicians can be seen as quite snobby. Does that ring true?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, I am definitely a part of the classical music world still, and have been, and yet I don't. It's hard for me to completely identify as a classical musician these days, just because the nature of what I've been doing has been shifting more towards just creating my own space with my own approach, my own music. And maybe the best way to describe it is an in-between between closer, but an in-between between classical music and certain other genres, maybe jazz. I'm not I'm a beginner at jazz, but just creating a little pocket that is close enough to classical music where I draw from that culture still, but I'm far enough away from it that I can see certain pros and cons of the whole culture. And what you said definitely exists. There's a lot of kind of snobbery about judging different types of music and blinders. Because to be fair though, it's necessary, like you said, to bring your craft up to the level that is required to maintain a performance career, to be able to participate in the classical music world. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of just complete focus. And you really don't have time for anything else, which is why I knew that it wasn't for me in its pure form, because I tried that and it's not something that I wanted, and it's not something that made me happy or excited about as a musician.
Yeah, I mean, it applies to every industry. There's always a level of snobbery somewhere along the lines. But, time will tell. It's just like the people who are more resilient in industry are usually the ones who are looking always at what's new, what's coming around the corner, developing their own artistry, becoming their own artist. And what you're doing is just like, you're putting yourself out there. It's kind of like this sort of equity idea that you're putting your name to something rather than necessarily just focusing on making a living from playing other people's music. You're making something of your own, and then pairing it with a YouTube channel and then the PBS videos. Like, it's just sort of adding different strings to your bow, and it's think it's really inspirational. I think it's with the climate right now, it's kind of the only way to be doing it securely and safely, because there has been this thing that musicians can have careers until they're aged 90, and literally until they pass away. And that's incredible. But if there's no demand to see those musicians live, or people physically aren't allowed to leave their homes, then where are they going to look? They need to look online. And if it's done in an educational manner that's approachable, and kind of forgiving to your audience, you have to be able to cater to quite a lot of different people. Because,
by the way, I think you're great at that.
Thank you.
Very, very.
It's because I don't really know anything, so I never profess to be an expert in anything, and then I'm just like, yeah, let's start from the beginning. That's where I do know something.
No, but I think when you're presenting something, whether it's at whatever level of musicianship or complexity, you're still presenting something to an audience that you're not quite sure who they are. Because of course you have an idea, general idea of who watches your videos, but when you're actually making the video, it's an unknown, and it's almost like a monologue with an imaginary audience in mind, but that can constantly shift and form in different ways. But you're very good at including a lot of people in that and presenting it in a way where it's so easy to follow wherever you come in. Does that make sense?
Well, I would honestly say the same thing for you, because there's a lot of stuff that I've forgotten since finishing studying, because I knew at age 22 that I wasn't going to pursue classical music any further. I wasn't going to do a master's. I was just really going to try and do the whole singer-songwriter thing. And there's so much I've forgotten that, you put things in just like it's just very well communicated. So this is just us, rubbing each other's egos about how incredible we are. But I think
no, you're great.
No, you are. I think it's important for musicians who are looking at this whole thing to remember that if you start saying, well, obviously about something, it's actually probably not obvious to somebody. So I've started, I write scripts now for my videos to make sure I'm just doing everything. I used to go a little bit off script, and it just took a lot of time to actually edit those videos into something. So I'm trying to be a bit more prepared, as that helps. And I do find myself going, well, obviously this is like this and this is like this. And then I'm like, no, it might not be obvious. And is it even that obvious to me? If I was just looking at this, because I've been thinking about this idea of cultivating this video and coming up with a story and teaching myself how to communicate it to my best ability. But someone who clicks on this video has only seen that idea for a split second before they start watching it and start learning about the subject. So I did a video on a fretless guitar, and I just thought, okay, do you know what? I really want this to be accessible to everyone. What if someone doesn't even know what a fret is? Talk about it. And I did see in the comments that someone had been like, don't you think for a guitar channel, people probably don't need to have that explained? But that was one person out of however many people that watched it who might not have known. And it's just to that person, I kind of want to be like, you just don't know who's watching. You might have a little idea. YouTube tells you the statistics of their age and their gender and their location, but it doesn't tell you their qualifications. It doesn't tell you what level of musician they are. They could be a 15-year-old that has tons of classical music experience as opposed to a 50-year-old that's just taking up the guitar. You can't put anyone in a box. So
there's also nothing that is ever lost from going to the fundamentals. And even when I'm teaching or talking about harmony or composition to non-beginners, sometimes I like just pointing out, okay, let's start with the very basics. How many pitches are we dealing with if you're not dealing with microtones. And maybe as a pianist, when I'm teaching or even putting together a video, a lot of times I just scale it back and say, okay, look at the piano. There are white keys and there are black keys. And the black keys are higher in terms of physical location on the instrument. And these things seem very basic, but oddly enough, surprisingly enough, these things can really make a difference sometimes in refocusing what you're paying attention to. And there's never anything lost in going back to that.
I will admit I used to be quite judgmental. Is that the right word? In terms of teaching. Like, I didn't want to teach when I was younger, and I knew that. It just wasn't of interest to me. And now all I realize is, like, if you can communicate something by teaching it, then you actually have a true understanding of it. And if you can't teach it, then you don't actually know. And if you can't say it out loud, you really do not understand it. And that freaked me out so much that I was like, oh my God, I really need to take a look at myself and figure out, what do I actually know? And I started going back to the basics with guitar, because, you play the things that you're comfortable with, you write in the style that you're comfortable with. But there are some things that you might just not know. And it's like, I was self-taught because I was taking classical music lessons. And because I was self-taught, I just skipped all the boring bits that I found boring in classical music. And then I just realized I didn't know simple things. Like, the pentatonic scale for a guitarist is like pretty much the only scale you need to know. Obviously, that's, for some people. And I didn't know it. And it's just like, for many years, and just going back to those basics is just, I couldn't agree more.
With someone so versatile like you, and coming from different approaches and working on different types of projects, what type of work do you do separate from making videos or recording on your own in the practice room, your living room, wherever you practice, in order to keep up your skills as a musician or learn new things, new pieces? What does your routine look like?
For a long time, I didn't have one. And it's only since I went full time last year that I actually, again, took a long, hard look at myself and was just like, if you're in the online space and you're not necessarily being compared to other guitarists, but you're definitely, once you have an audience, you're put in that sort of bracket of someone who might be way more proficient than you. So
full-time meaning full-time
YouTubing, online and stuff.
Okay.
And it was time management. My time management was poor and everything like that. So now I'm not very good at I like setting myself a challenge. So figuring out the best way that I learn. And the first thing I ever wanted to do on the guitar was learn songs. So I'm always trying to choose a song that will take like months and months and months to learn and arrange. And I'm working on one right now I'm just tabbing it out and just working out exactly how I play it and that sort of thing. And just, again, it's kind of like always go back to the basics and just see what you've forgotten, and then tabbing out stuff and really understanding my right hand as opposed to what's happening in my left hand, and like just stuff like that I haven't really paid that much attention to, but I'm glad I'm doing it now. It's never too late to really start. It's just like how you started making videos. Like, it's like, okay, what am I missing? What can I see in a video that I'm not seeing? And the videos that I do about strange guitars and for the YouTube channel, it's always a learning curve of like, okay, do I need to sit down and write something right now, like brand new, or can I fall back on songs I've already written? How do I want to demonstrate this instrument the best I can? How much time do I have with the instrument? Is it on loan? Am I in a store? All that sort of stuff. So it kind of all revolves around that, and just like making sure I have enough new things to keep myself entertained as well as other people. But yeah, at the moment it's just songs.
I'm curious about what you said regarding time management. You said that you were not good at it and then you changed something. How exactly did you improve your time management skills?
It's become quite pernickety.
What does that mean? What's pernickety?
It basically means I'm being anal about it.
I've never heard.
Yeah, as soon as I said it, I was like, oh my god, is that an English thing? Yeah, I'm getting quite because when you have no one chasing you for things, although the YouTube sort of schedule helps me put things in order and make prioritize. I'm a notorious procrastinator. Like it's such a talent, right? Like sometimes I just realize how talented I am at procrastinating, and it's exhausting. So I don't know, I listen to guys like Gary Vaynerchuk and Tim Ferriss, where they're always talking about how many hours they work a day, and I just started writing down like, how many hours am I actually working, and what does that work look like? Like, is guitar practice work? It kind of is, but it's a different kind of work. So I'll differentiate guitar practice to creative video making or music making or songwriting, and then technical stuff like emails, podcast editing, like all the other things that go on behind the scenes, even putting like planning and time management and video ideas into all that sort of stuff, and just breaking it down and just seeing how I spend my hours in a day. It's really helped. I've been doing it solidly for the last 2 months, and it's.
And where do you keep track of everything?
A notepad. I'm old school. Have to write it down. I did have a whiteboard for a bit, but that kind of I wasn't updating it in here and there, so I just keep it in the notepad now. And then it's like a bit more private.
If I had a place for, what was that? It's more private?
Yeah, so that people can't see how crazy I am when they come into my apartment.
I was going to say, if I had space or somewhere where I could put a whiteboard, I would totally do that. I think whiteboards and chalkboards are awesome. Just having that space, that visual.
It really helps. I'm very visual. I guess most video makers
I can tell.
But yeah, how about you? Like, how do you discipline yourself to become the musician that you are? Like, from the age of 7, I imagine you've had a pretty rigorous routine.
It's always fluctuated over the years, but especially surrounding my university years, conservatory years, my work was very intense. The practicing thing, keeping up, just a quantity of practice, which was the primary focus, I feel like, throughout those years, was a challenge. I didn't really do much else besides these little art projects that I made for myself, whether it was drawing or taking pictures. Those were the 2 main things that I really spent a lot of time on outside of practicing. But even when I was really focused and just putting in so much practice time, I always wanted to do other things. So as soon as I just had the freedom to do so, I really slacked off for some time. And this slacking off for some people means something else, or everyone has a different amount of work they put in where they consider themselves to be slacking off. But in relation to what I was doing before, I had some time where I felt like I was not being productive at all. And so I think about a year and a half ago, I started to like yourself, be a little more specific in terms of tracking what I do and being aware of where I spend my time. And I just use a simple spreadsheet where I have little blocks in terms of, little categories of what type of work I'm doing, whether it's writing music or practicing a piece, classical music, or just something technique focused, or something for a video. So I have all these columns, and I just log in how much time I spent on it, and I color code everything so that I'm not focused on the exact details, but overall, say that after a month's worth of logging, I can look at this sheet and have a general sense of where my time has been spent, just by the colors. And then if that was intentional, I feel like I'm on track, or I know I'm on track. And if that's different than what I had planned, maybe just as an agenda on the side, then I know that I haven't been too exact about where I'm spending my time. But I feel like a lot of these categories are under the umbrella of just music work. I haven't gotten to the point where I include a lot of work outside of music into this picture so that I'm organized with it. For example, editing videos, researching for videos, all of that is just put into one giant column of things. And I feel like to really be properly organize that should probably be much more specific.
Yeah, but you've got your priorities right in terms of like it's all about the music, and
for the time being,
yeah.
And it's hard because a lot of times I forget about things that I want to be doing musically. Going back to classical music, I don't have the type of projects lined up for me and the types of deadlines to ensure that I keep up my classical performing and practicing. That doesn't mean that I don't want to do it, but it's just not pressing. So a lot of times I forget about it until I look at, the general sheet. And then I realize, oh, it's been 2 weeks since I've opened up the Bach books and Chopin. And then I remind myself, this is something that is really crucial to my vitality as a musician. And so then I bring myself back to it. Without that, there's so many things going on in my mind that even the things that I really care about, I forget about. And that's strange because, you would feel like you would remember things that you really care about.
Is that strange? Because I do think, like, I've got I use this, it's by the Swiss designer. I wish I remembered her name. It's an incredible piece of software. It's so basic. It's called To Do, and it's spelled TEUXDEUX, like To Do. It's really sweet. It's really, really sweet. And
is it an app or online?
So it's an app and a desktop thing. So you can set it as your homepage, and it just all comes up, and it's just your week. And again, it's good for people who are forgetful. And I started it in 2016 when I was starting the YouTube channel properly, and like reminding myself to go and comment on people's videos, and then I could tick that off. Comment on comments on my videos, and then things like it's bad. It's like ring your parents, ring your granny. Like things that you care about, you really, really care about, but they might just slip your mind, or like the weekend might go and you just realize you need to do it. And so I checked this app, and I've just, they've got two settings where it's like, I can't remember what you can either go monthly, or you can, I think it's like Cynic and Believer or something like that, where it's like you can either pay monthly or you can pay for a year. I think I've got that wrong. ToDo.com. It's so good. I'm not sponsored.
No, I love these kinds of things. I like I said, I use a plain spreadsheet, and I've refined how I put those columns over the years, and which colors I use.
Oh yeah. Oh, I bet it's so good. I bet you could sell it, to be honest. the best thing about to do is that you can write to remind yourself whether it's something you want to do every day or every week or every bi-weekly or a month, and then you can have columns underneath that never recur and they just stay there, and that's where I put the things that I want to do long term. But there's only so many hours in a day. I've said this a lot in some of these interviews, but just realizing you only have 24 hours every day is like, it was a weird realization to me. It's like, no matter how successful, no matter how proficient you are in something, like you'll never have more hours in a day. And most of that is taken up with sleep, eating. You need to socialize sometimes. And although none of us can right now, and you need to run errands, and there are so many things that take up that time. So like, how much time do you actually have to dedicate to certain things? And like for me, I really set myself the challenge of learning Spanish, and I just realized I was like, okay, I can chip away at it a little bit each day, but I'm really not going to be able to pay attention to this until maybe the end of the year, maybe next year, maybe in the next 5 years. Like, it's like, forgive yourself that there are quite a lot of other things that we all need to be doing every day. But just because you're not doing it now doesn't mean you're not ever going to do it.
Sometimes learning things in a consistent yet micro dose kind of way, sometimes it works, definitely, for a lot of things. But I find that for learning a skill or something that you really want to excel in, doing that could be oddly stressful sometimes, because you feel like you just want to dive in and immerse yourself and give it your all. And so it's just really frustrating to stay there. And so then you end up not being consistent. And I think in those cases, it's better to just find a time where you can do that. And it'll probably maybe even be efficient in terms of learning, because then you can just go deep.
Yeah, and it's learning that you can actually have different ways of benefiting from something. So like for me, I want to do that. I want to dive in. I basically want to go and live in Spain for like 3 months. I want to learn flamenco guitar. Like I want to do that. That's like a big life goal. I can't wait to maybe one day make that a possibility. Obviously not right now, but the other thing is like something like exercise. Like I had to learn how to exercise and really start taking care of myself. And you can't spend 10 hours doing that a day. Like you really only have to start small. So just figuring out like, how do you want to approach something? Is it a life goal? Is it like a creative project, or is it something that you actually just have to form into a habit? And sadly, like Spanish is probably something that I actually have to form into a daily habit, even though I want to just dive straight in, because otherwise, I might do 3 months in Spain or something like that. I'll come back and I'll forget it. So,
Or just find a friend that speaks Spanish to you.
I know. I have a few friends who, so I just, it's just one of those other things.
But the trick there is to start getting to know them while speaking Spanish, because what is difficult is learning a language and you have a friend, both of you speak English and this other language. If you start off with English, it's super hard to switch. So I always have kept that in mind in terms of, not to say that, I'm friends with some people just to speak a certain language. But, if you are, slightly going that route, I did notice that it's very hard to switch over.
So how many languages do you speak?
I speak English, Korean, a little bit of Spanish just from school, and a little bit of French, enough to converse, because I lived there. I actually, when I moved there, I did not learn. I didn't know how to speak French before, because everyone told me, because I was living in Paris, everyone told me that, oh, you'll be fine. Don't worry. Everyone speaks English there nowadays. And And while it is true, you can get by just by speaking English, the two teachers that I was set out to study with there, whom I only contacted with via snail mail because they were that old school and that I should have known, they did not speak English at all, both of them. They were in their 80s and both French. And I just realized right away, oh, this was a mistake. Looking back on it, it was kind of foolish to just assume that my reasoning was, well, they're very difficult to get a hold of, which is why I've had such minimal contact with them, and they're both international musicians, so they they must, that's foolish. But I learned the hard way. But while living in Paris, I tried to make friends just to make friends, which is a very difficult thing for me to do in general. But I had no choice. I found that even in person, there are people where I would meet them, and if I started in English, it was very difficult to switch over to French. But those that I started off with in French, as horrible as it was and as many mistakes I was making, we just kind of kept that going. It's kind of strange. It's like a first impression thing.
I asked my Patreons for some questions too. Oh, here we go. Come on, load.
And these are asked for everyone that does a podcast?
These ones are from Patreon, so they're directed towards you, and then I'll get onto the ones I've got. I've just got 4 questions that I'm asking everyone to round off the interview. So, but there was one really good one. Okay. Right, so this comes from Mons. You have explored a great many different genres over the past few years. Are there any prejudices, structural reasons, as in the educational system, or other factors that you feel are hindering a closer cooperation between musicians or educators across genres? That's an intense question.
Yeah, well, that is a very intense question. I think within the educational realm, the things that benefit us learning specifically in depth about a specific genre, those things make it inevitable for us to be very specific and not necessarily closed off, but just hyper-focused. And this is, like we talked about, much more intense in the classical genre, among others. But because of this focused nature, it's hard to open the doors and widen that realm of perspective to include other genres, because your focus is this here. And I think while this benefits learning what you're focusing on in depth, it's also a misconception, because in order to learn this properly, to give it perspective in a way where you can compare it to other things, also include other approaches, it just benefits your overall approach to everything. But this is hard to do, because I feel like this type of system would have to be catered towards an individual with different types of learning preferences and different types of goals. So in order to cater to a wide range of students, how we learn in conservatories and how these educational systems are laid out really caters towards the first type, which is, let's just focus on this, which is why you have different types of majors. You don't go into music school majoring in classical music, but with a curiosity in flamenco or, jazz, but with a little bit of, I don't know. I won't speak with jazz, because I feel like jazz has this covered a little more, because it's not quite as narrow. But I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know what schooling you did specifically, but I just feel like it's hard to check off all of these boxes. I'm just giving slack for schools, because if I were to sit down and imagine a perfect educational system that for musicians that includes multi-genres, that would be very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the whole thing of like, there's only so many hours in a day. They're under strict instruction to get people to a certain level in a certain skill, and it's next to impossible to get the balance of creating everyone like an incredibly well-rounded musician in all different types of genres. Like, obviously you have to focus. I think the only thing that people really can do and do for themselves is keep an open mind, which I think I imagine with your help, with Adam Neely's help, musicians now who are using YouTube as a tool to learn, whether they're at school. Like, I know that there are so many people at music school who are now watching YouTube and, really trusting some of the music community to give them something that maybe their school isn't. I think it's only going to get better in terms of like all the cooperation, as Mon said, over the different genres.
Could you maybe summarize or reread that question, because I feel like there was something there that I missed.
He said, are there any prejudices, structural reasons, as in the educational system, or other factors that you feel are hindering a closer cooperation between musicians or educators across genres?
The only thing I might add is that because of that structure, it's hard to mingle cross-genre and cross-circle, because, and I think it has to do with human nature. We all don't want to feel too awkward and get out of our comfort zones. And I found that the first thing that I noticed about myself and my experience dipping into other genres was that I felt incredibly uncomfortable, self-conscious, and I didn't like that feeling at first, because I was used to feeling at least a little secure in my little circle, and jumping out of that and feeling like I'm making a fool out of myself was not fun at the time. So I think just avoiding that was just the reason why I didn't do it sooner. And I think that it also applies to people that don't want to cross over and explore.
I can totally see that, and I see that in so many musicians I do know. You know how much work you've put into becoming the musician that you are, to such a high standard, and all the qualifications you've gained along the way, to then have to start from zero again in something that is obviously related, but music is just, it's impossible to learn everything about everything all the time. So it's actually probably one of my favorite things now, and one of the things I realized that I didn't like about the education system that I was in, where it was very closed off, closed-minded. But luckily I did an academic degree, so we did choose different modules. And the best thing about university for me, as opposed to school, like school was far more closed off, when you'd expect that maybe to be a bit freer. Students are younger. The stakes aren't quite as high, and as obviously then you get to university level, and it's all about gaining a degree. But then I got to university and I studied the Beatles for the first time, and I actually understood. It just suddenly all made sense to me, whereas it hadn't at school. And school, they weren't even very happy with me playing rock music on my weekends, or I had one teacher tell me to stop singing pop songs because he thought I'd damage my voice, which was completely incorrect, because I was already a trained singer, and I went to my singing teacher. No, this was in school.
In school. It's pre-university.
yeah, pre-university, like from age 13 to 18, had a really tough time with my music teachers there because they didn't want me doing rock music. And they kind of came around to it towards the end because I just wasn't giving up and I wasn't backing down. But then when I got to university, my lecturers and the professors, they were so happy with me having this other thing that kind of differentiated me from other students. And I felt like, and this is terrible, but I feel like the insecurity that lies around certain types of musicians and certain genres, because this isn't just about classical music, this comes, it's definitely in the guitar world too. If you have an insecurity about something, you'll be more defensive about it. You'll be less likely to own up to the things you don't know. And then you'll possibly share that insecurity with your pupils, or your friends, your family, whatever, and your judgment on that certain thing. Whereas if you keep an open mind about everything and realize people love different stuff, some people aren't ever going to be interested in classical music, and that's okay. Some people aren't ever going to switch from classical music to blues or, dance or whatever. Like, it's all okay, just as long as those people aren't judging each other. Like, there's there's no need for that.
Very well said.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you tell I've thought about it?
It's an important thing about, but yeah, you said it so nicely.
Okay, let's get into the final questions. Which album or artist have you recommended to your friends and family the most?
I would say the two Glenn Gould recordings of Goldberg Variations. They're kind of I don't know. They're really epic for me, and I really enjoy having them as a companion over the years, because certain times I prefer the earlier one, certain times I prefer the older one, or the later one, and it's just a work of art.
I was recommended Glenn Gould at school before university, and I totally get what you mean. If you could have a drink with any musician, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you ask them?
I'll just go with the answer that I would probably give the most. J.S. Bach. Yeah. I wouldn't really want to sit there and chat with him, though. I think I just want to sit with him at a table and just have tea or coffee or something, and just observe him doing human things. That would be very interesting for me. Just very, he doesn't even need to talk.
Well, and also he wouldn't be aware of like how he's perceived now, or like your understanding of him.
Yeah, I just want to see him, have a piece of toast or hang a towel or something just very normal. Well,
because he was I know he's an extraordinary, oh my god, like the most prolific musician ever, but just he was ordinary, and he was kind of like deemed ordinary to a certain extent, right? So
exactly, if you read about just his life, I've been to I've been to Leipzig, where there's a museum, obviously, and where he used to work, and you see all of these artifacts. So you can, hypothetically put together a picture of, J.S. Bach, this ordinary family man that was an extraordinary, and that's really downplaying it, musician, just incredible. But I would just like to witness it in real time.
I went to Leipzig with Adam, actually, as we started making, both of us started making videos, and then neither of us have finished them, because we were over in Germany for a Thomann event, and we just like, let's go to Leipzig, let's go to the museum. I'd never been, and the thing I took away from it was just the deadlines It's like he had so many deadlines, like weekly, daily deadlines he had to meet. And that's why he was so prolific. And it's just like, if you don't have, I think if there is a misconception, if someone, doesn't necessarily know all that much about him and understand that that was why he produced so much in his lifetime, it's like, set yourself deadlines, like actually figure it out, whether it's YouTube videos every week or whether it's just writing an exercise or something. It's just like, that's how to, obviously I'm not saying YouTube videos can be compared to Bach's
no, it gives the structure. By the way, side question, what's your deadline? What do your YouTube deadlines look like?
I upload at least once a week, but it can be 3 times a week. And I really like uploading. I really love uploading on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, because I've got little things like I love doing these long form interviews. So those are Tuesday talks, which I kind of started to dwindle out, but then I was like, no, I miss it. I miss talking to people. I miss. So I brought it back even longer form, and then Thursdays are usually like guitar specific videos about something strange and weird. And then Saturdays are usually original music stuff, which, don't necessarily do as well as the guitar videos. And, even the long form interviews don't do as well, but they just make me happy. So I just always want that to be like the base of the channel. Yeah.
That's so important. I admire that structure, and also what you said there at the end about including those things because they matter to you and they make you happy. That's so important to be aware of.
How often do you set aside time to actually sit down and make a video with all the other things you've got going on? And especially, with the PBS stuff too, last year.
Well, now I'm not with PBS. So that has freed up my video making side of the brain. I guess when I see a project in the horizon, I start making a video. For example, if a composer's birthday comes up that I want to make a how to sound like video, I would do that. And because a lot of the videos just follow the natural progression of things that I'm doing with my music projects separate from the video space, although there is a constant overlap, it'll just mirror what I'm doing. So if I'm doing projects that really can't involve video, maybe for a specific reason, or I just don't see it fitting, then I'll be quiet in the video space. And if I'm maybe really pursuing learning a specific type of music or something new, I'll usually incorporate that into a genre video. And then a lot of the piano-centric videos, they're really centered around things that I'm doing for myself to really just practice and work on my craft. And at a certain point, I'll organize what I've been doing or the product of that into a video and just share something so that other people can take notes and apply it to their own practice or whatever it is. But with those types of flows, those types of recurring things happening, I would say about once a month has been my upload frequency. But that may change to be less frequent or more frequent, but on average, if you look at the year, it's 12 to 15 videos, I'd say.
I think it just depends what kind of content. When you're making the videos you're making, like I can only imagine like how many hours they take.
Yeah, they take a long time.
Yeah, there's a reason I do these sorts of videos where I'm like, okay, we just both set up cameras, set up the audio, and then...
But listen, this will take a long time to edit too, just because you're dealing with large files and you have to check everything. So
yeah, but it's a lot easier.
You're a hard worker.
It's a lot easier than you might think. Okay, tell me about your favorite piece of music gear or piece of tech, which doesn't have to be music related, and the story behind it.
Favorite piece of music gear? I'd say my Zoom H5 because I've this has been my primary recording device for audio since starting YouTube, and I've always felt like I didn't understand how to use it because I'd make different types of mistakes with it. And then I went through a phase where I thought that I really needed to upgrade it into something. I just thought, I just don't have the right thing, the equipment. But I've just stuck with it. And I think through persistence, I just feel comfortable handling it now, which is why I'd say it's my favorite thing, because I use it for basically everything. It's not the greatest piece of equipment, but it certainly allows me to capture what I'm playing and put it into a video. So I like things that are practical, and it's very small.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lesson I'll take away from that. It's like it's the learning to use what you have, rather than always thinking that if you get the next upgrade, the more expensive thing, especially when it comes to music gear, which we know is so expensive, or camera gear. Oh my God. I was umming and ahhing about upgrading my cameras, and then I just realized, oh wait, I can look on YouTube and make sure I'm using all the right settings. Suddenly everything got a whole lot better. So yeah, learn what you have, and then it will put you in a better mindset of using it and everything like that. I couldn't agree more. I've got a Zoom H6 that I couldn't believe quite how good it was. I only got it earlier this year because I was working for Shure microphones, so I felt a very brand specific loyalty towards them, obviously, when I was working for them. But yeah, okay, final question. Are you ready for this?
Based on the way that you're prepping it, I'm not sure.
It's so easy. If you could give your younger self a word of musical advice, what would it be?
Don't take yourself so seriously. Yeah, don't take yourself too seriously, because at a young age, and this was my experience for sure, but in general, I feel like it's very easy to be influenced by other people's goals and other people's sense of not ego, but just other people's standards that rub off on you before forming your own. So if you're around people that are imposing this grand vision for themselves and for others, and you're not quite ready for that, I feel like you could be infused with this sense of, everything has to be so epic. And especially the environments that I've grown up in and been in school in, I feel like that was a big part of my experience. And it wasn't until I got older where I started to realize, it's really, don't take yourself so seriously. It's not that it's not that grand, everything in life and music. And I would definitely say that to myself. How about you?
Well, I think that's the perfect way, but like a way to end the interview. But I totally agree. It goes back to the whole thing, to round the whole interview off, in terms of like how you describe yourself to certain people. And like, I'm not ashamed of eventually calling myself a YouTuber, because it might not be seen as like the most I don't know, especially in like academic fields, and it can seem so frivolous, but when you actually understand what it's doing for the community, like the music community, the world, and like how it's going to move forward, it's probably one of the most exciting things to be part of. So it all comes from not taking yourself too seriously, to be able to start learning how to make a video about something. And I show myself learning things and making mistakes on things and share those sorts of embarrassing moments. And it's just like, with that sort of personality, becomes a lot, it's just the communication between certain people is just suddenly a lot better, and suddenly we realize that we've all gone through the same things, and that's really wonderful and humbling and nice, and yeah, it's also accessible.
I'd say that to myself, you know, a few months ago as well. Don't take yourself so seriously. And I think it's something that I think I really need to keep reminding myself throughout the years. Even regarding YouTube, what you said, when I edit and put together a little project, I get super specific and concerned about having things exactly the way I want it. And I have a very high standard in terms of how I'm going to edit it and what kinds of animations I'll put in, all of that. And I feel like at times I'm getting a little too precious with it. And it's the same type of thing. I'm taking it too seriously in terms of being so exact. And that's not always necessary. So I would say the same thing to myself now.
Well, just to end, you know, in terms of like a positive note of what you're doing, like there's a time and place for that. And that's why you've created this catalogue of videos that are just so beautifully made, and like you finish them. It's not like you don't finish them. You know, you get them finished, you know how to start and end a project, which so many people don't know how to do, especially when they're perfectionists. So you are able to deliver, but maybe there's like a type of content that you could make that doesn't require that. Maybe. I don't know. Just, this is selfish as well. This is me wanting you to upload every week. What can I learn from you?
What can I learn from you? I've learned a lot from you, and I appreciate what you're saying here at the end. I think it's just, if there's a word to summarize this whole talk between us two today, I think the word balance comes to mind, because a lot of things have to do with being aware of where you could maybe improve or kind of step back from, but at the same time just embracing how things are. You know, if they're not perfectly the way that you want it to be, maybe there are pros to that as well. So
amen.
Yes, this was awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I have learnt so much from Nahre, and this conversation has inspired me to take a look at the fundamentals, as well as reignite my interest in classical and jazz music. So look out for videos on that soon. I hope you enjoyed it. Now for information on the sponsor of this entire series. More than 250,000 artists rely on DistroKid to distribute their music, including myself. If you're wanting to have your music available on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, Tidal, amongst many more stores, then you should sign up using the link in the description. An account starts at just $19.99 for unlimited songs and albums in 12 months. And with the link in the description, you will get 7% off your first year. I just want to acknowledge the strange time we are currently living through. I'm aware that many people are suffering, and maybe you found yourself with a lot of spare time. I just want you to be encouraged to, I don't know, create something new and not worry about what other people think, and instead just finish something and put it up on the internet. If you're writing and producing music, then I can't recommend DistroKid enough. It's so easy to use, so a massive thanks to them for making this series possible, and check out the link in the description for that 7% discount. But otherwise, I will see you soon.